Tariq Ali has been involved in organising this festival with us. It's been absolutely brilliant working with him. He's a writer and an activist, and recently, he wrote a book called The Obama Syndrome, years ago actually, that predicted accurately the path that Obama would follow. I'm sure he needs no further introduction. I'd like to thank him very much for all his help and support. Tariq Ali.
Dear friends, I'm extremely happy that this festival has been organized, and I'm pretty sure, given the atmosphere both at this meeting and at others during the day, people have been telling me since I came that we will have more and more people coming and participating in debates and discussions. Let me begin from where David Harvey left off. I agree with him, and I think what he has suggested is not only necessary, but without it we're doomed. Which is, how do we organize ourselves? How do we operate politically in a world where all the certainties of yesterday have virtually disappeared? What is going to be the agency that will bring about social change? It will vary from country to country. The largest proletariat in the world is today in China, followed quickly by India and that part of Asia. We won't and we will not write it off, because we know already there have been struggles of peasants in parts of China, there have been factory occupations going on, not reported because they're not on a national scale, but they are taking place. In Western Europe and the United States, countries which have largely, though not completely, been deindustrialized, there is a new mood which has arisen, which took everyone by surprise, which are essentially people who don't want to have anything to do with traditional organized politics. It's just a fact. But yet, this politics, or some politics, let's say a newer left, is absolutely essential. And that left also, as it arises, has to break with the modes of functioning of the past, just as the world is changing. I mean, new technology, for instance, has transformed the way we communicate. If used properly, it could be the most democratic instrument ever, allowing people to get information, to make decisions. And no doubt it will be used in that way in the years that lie ahead. So I think that is, we are on the cusp of something new, which hasn't yet happened, but a lot of indications from different parts of the world, including Europe and North America, that something is up, that people are no longer satisfied with the societies in which they live, and most importantly and interestingly in some ways, that the notion that democracy on its own is sufficient to solve the problems that confront us, capitalist democracy, which is now, you know, in the 60s and 70s we used to refer to it as bourgeois democracy, but that bourgeois democracy encompassed a lot of working class movements and working class parties, communist, social democratic, etc. This democracy now, as it's required today by the capitalist class, is one-track democracy. Effectively, what we are seeing and what we have seen is the Americanization of European politics, with political parties existing as machines, cut off by and large from their supporters, where communications with their supporters are conducted through the medium of television. There is little direct contact, with the exception of brave, courageous members of parliament, alas, a minority like Jeremy, and a handful of others. By and large, the party machines have taken politics away from their members, from their voters, from their supporters. And young people are in rebellion against this. And in their rebellion, they sometimes go far and say no politics at all, and that doesn't work. Whether it's the Occupy movements in the United States, whether it's the Indignados in Spain, all heroic movements and reflecting the unease, or whether it's the movement in Italy, which suddenly gained millions and millions of supporters against the traditional parties. But this was very volatile, because when these members arrived in Parliament and had nothing to offer, the next local elections that happened a few weeks ago saw their vote completely go down and a vote for the centre-left party go up again. Why? Because people vote to punish the mainstream parties, but at the same time they want something else. And if that doesn't happen, then they react again. So even though the Italian so-called centre-left is in alliance with the centre-right, in Berlusconi, it has managed to get its vote up. It hasn't been wiped out. Unlike Greece, where you had a very dramatic situation where the centre-left party was virtually wiped out, and Syriza, extremely positive new organization, an alliance of, by and large, the entire left groups, including people who had left the left-centre party, became the second party in the land. Now, what is dangerous about these times is that if you don't have any political alternatives at all, you do have the rise of ultra-right and openly fascist, semi-fascist organizations. In Britain, we've noticed the rise of UKIP, which has been entered by fascists of numerous hues. There's no doubt about that. They've been doing it for years. And is presented by the media as a sort of jolly organization. Isn't Farage funny? At least he can laugh. Well, you know, he may laugh, but he laughs at the expense of the majority of ordinary working people in this country. And the fact that pressure is being put on the Conservatives is on its own worth nothing. It depends who's putting the pressure. And the fact that we on the left have no alternative, not even the beginnings of an alternative, which could challenge all this, is dangerous. And what is dangerous in Greece is that the Golden Dawn, an open fascist party, it's not a secret, it's their Nazis, they call themselves as such, that an attempt to illegalize racism, because there have been pogroms of immigrant workers in Athens and Thessaloniki, has been defeated because the Conservative government won't agree. Having agreed, they've backtracked on passing this motion because it would mean prosecution of these thugs. And why? They say that the military and the police will not tolerate it. That is the reason they give. And the police won't tolerate it because half the paramilitary section of the police are members of Golden Dawn. That is the danger. That if we don't do something about it, on many different levels, the right will grow. I mean, there are French friends who tell me very openly, you know, it's not impossible that Marine Le Pen will be the next president of France. I personally doubt it, but there is worry. And the reason for that worry is of a centre-left government coming to power and letting its own supporters down, and then intervening in Africa to show it's got muscle. It's the Blair model, which Holland is trying to impose in a slightly nicer way, but war is very much part of that. Now, I'm going to talk very briefly about the wars, the war side of capitalism. Tomorrow I'll be talking at length on what the American empire is and whether it is in decline or not, which I doubt very strongly that it is in decline, but it has suffered setbacks. But this new version of capitalism and the fact that we live in truncated democracies, where the media basically giving, taking aside a few newspapers, speaks with one voice, which, by the way, just to refer to something Jeremy said, became very obvious when Hugo Chavez in Venezuela died, that the degree of hatred in the obituaries that were published in The Economist, the Financial Times, virtually every paper in Europe, 3 pages of poison in Le Monde, the French paper, poison in El País. Why? You ask yourself why. He's dead. They could be moderate. They could say, okay, we didn't agree with him, but he's dead and he was popular. Large chunks of his people loved him. No. The hatred, I think, is due to fear. It's a fear that it's best to wipe out this example as quickly as possible, because the fact that Chavez was acquiring popularity in parts of Europe, the Syriza leader, Tsipras, said that he was the politician he admired most in the world, is not popular with the powers that be and the elites. So it's an unpleasant atmosphere that we live in. But if you look at how the world has proceeded since the late 90s, it's systematic, fairly clear. The emergence of the United States as the single most powerful country in the world and the world's only global empire, politically if not economically, militarily, certainly. And you have the Gulf War in Iraq, which began to split the left. You have this followed by the war on Yugoslavia, a civil war that could have been prevented had the European Union said that the IMF plan for Yugoslavia is wrong, destabilize Pakistan, and that the West would never be able to win. This is now virtually the common sense of many people writing in the media, including many people in the American army. Iraq, we tried to stop that war and failed. But we tried, and we were absolutely right on that as we see what's happened. And today we look at what's going on in Syria. Now, this is a difficult situation, obviously, because on the one hand, it's impossible to support the antics of this regime, which could have sorted it out very rapidly after the national uprising began. But on the other hand, we see what is going on, what happened in Libya in its last phases, is that the West is going to intervene. They're planning to intervene, they've been sending weapons. Britain and France, as the attack dogs, have been forward in this, and that has to be opposed. Because there is no reason on earth why the Western powers should be in these countries at all. It is an attempted recolonization, quite open, both in the Arab world and in parts of Africa. I mean, we haven't discussed the Congo today, where nearly 8 million people have died over the last 10 to 12 years. Why? Because of interests, capitalist interests, fighting against each other. So the wars that take place are, if you like, indirect wars, where one single power, backed by its European subsidiary, attempts to establish control over the economic resources of countries so it can determine the prices and the conditions on which energy can be sold to the rest of the world. Hence, the attempt to destabilize the Iranians and even to threaten them with X, Y, and Z, because they refuse to come into line. And that, in my opinion, is what the war in Syria is all about, to totally isolate Iran and make it a place with whom the Israelis can do business. That is what they want to do. So these are huge problems, but we live in a world where it's impossible to discuss them openly. There have hardly been any serious debates in Parliament on these issues. And so we have to create parliaments from below, which on a tiny level this conference is, because the way forward is going to be and has to be the involvement of the masses in cities, in regions, in countries, where they make decisions themselves and where they recover a lost art, an art and a politics that has been lost because historical memory has been damaged, of when you virtually are in occupation of a city, you don't let it drop, like happened during the Egyptian uprising in Alexandria, or the Greek uprisings in Thessaloniki in particular. You take the city and you try and run the city. And that is where some of the ideas we will be discussing at this conference become immediately important, to show people we could run the city in a different way. This is what we could do if we acted collectively and democratically. Both go together. Because the task is enormous. I end on this. What David Harvey said is extremely important. We don't have all the answers. We can't pretend we do. And how could we have the answers isolated as we are from all the mainsprings of society? The answers come through experience. And the experience is that you start somewhere. How can we ecologists even think seriously of solving the problems posed by the degradation of the planet without a central idea of the early years of the last century, which is planning? There is no way you can do it without planning. Planning on a continental scale, planning on a national scale, planning on a global scale. Yet if you mention the word planning, people say, oh, no, it's Stalinist Russia. Well, no, that's not the planning we want, obviously. But we do need planning on every level. On the level of cities, on the level of regions, on the level of countries, on the level of continents, on the level of the world. And it's not easy, but at least these ideas have to be circulated. And that, I think, is the importance of the struggles that are taking place today, because what these struggles do, the Occupy movement, the Indignados, the formation of Syriza, conferences like this, they're a starting point to start thinking in a different way. And on that level, we break totally and completely with the ideas of the ruling elites in the world today. Thank you.